Hey guys, Barry Nissan here from Epic Cycles. In today's video, we're going to do a demonstration of how to swap out a motor wheel on a Wolf Warrior 11. Stay tuned.
Get down.
Hi everyone, in today's video we're going to show you how to remove a motor from a Wolf Warrior 11 scooter. Right now I'll just show you the tools that are required. This one here, we have a 21mm socket. That's to remove the rear axle nuts on the motor. Two 8mm Allen wrenches. That's to separate the suspension forks here. A 4mm Allen bolts or Allen key. Scissors for electrical tape. We have Automotive tire levers to help separate the rear suspension. Another 4mm and sometimes as needed dead blow here. So first things first is we'll remove the deck covering that houses the entire battery and the controllers inside. What we'll want to do is remove this and then disconnect all the wiring, including the high voltage batteries and controller. So underneath this rubber deck, there are a series of 4mm Allen bolts that you'll just want to remove. And you can leave the rubber matting on. It's not necessary to totally remove the rubber mat. Now we have the deck open of the Wolf Warrior 11 Pro. And here are the high voltage wires. We're just going to remove the tape on here just to be safe so that we can disconnect the high voltage wires to the battery. One thing that's important to note is when we disconnect the motor wires, you'll know that it's colored yellow, green, blue. This is the wire for the front motor. We're going to be disconnecting the wire for the rear motor, and you can see once you have your deck open, the motor wire for the rear runs the length of the battery inside the compartment here. So this is the rear motor wire. And it's important to note that when you reconnect it, that the blue is connected to the green and the green is connected to the blue. Otherwise, if you color match the blue and greens together, the motor will not spin in the right direction once you have it powered up. So I'll just repeat, the blue connects to green and the green connects to blue. So now that we have these untaped, we can just disconnect, ready? The high voltage wires. Yep.
And don't forget to disconnect the charger.
And the charge port wire is these two yellow connectors for the two controllers. We'll just disconnect those two. This makes it easier to lift the battery out of its compartment just to give you a little extra space to work with. Sometimes it can be tricky to lift the battery out of its compartment because there's not much space for your fingers to pry it up and the battery's fairly heavy. So just take your time. Through the chassis, there's a little O-ring that seals it through here. And don't forget, we already disconnected this. This is basically a clamp for the motor wire that fastens it to this suspension structure here, so be sure to disconnect that also. And it's easier to push the leads out one by one because there's three of them. There's the green first, yellow, and then blue. So now you have the rear motor fully disconnected, and now we'll disconnect the motor from the scooter. And that's where our 21mm socket and 8mm wrench will come in handy. So the 21mm socket is for the end axle nuts. So there's quite a bit of torque required to remove the rear nuts on the axle, so if you can get an extra person to help, that would be a lot easier as well. Now if you want, you can also remove the rear brake, so that it makes it a little easier to clear the disc rotor. There's two 4mm bolts here in the swing arm. After you remove that, the rear brake just slides right out. Just like that. And before we try to drop the motor, there's two 8mm bolts here that we'll want to loosen just to separate these two forks. There's one 8mm on each side. Just want to loosen it just enough so that it starts to expand, but not so much that you remove it completely. Sometimes tapping it a little bit will free the bolts from each other as well. Now there's some safety tabs washers that are on this axle, and the axle is kind of like a slotted oval, and these washers hold the motor onto the cutouts for the suspension swing arm. So what we normally do is we'll take like a flathead screwdriver to kind of break these free so that we can drop the motor a lot easier. You can see that there's a little tooth here that holds it in the slot there just for safety, and there's one on each side, so there's two, one on the outside and one on the inside, and that's the same for the other side. And there you go. So we use these tire levers to kind of pry these suspension forks apart, and the rear motor now has dropped, obviously, but there was a bit of effort required to remove this slotted axle from the dropout there. But that's pretty much it, and that's how to remove a rear motor of a Wolf Warrior Pro.
You have it, guys. The rear motor wheel of the Wolf Warrior 11 was uninstalled. If you'd like to continue further with this video, we will now demonstrate how to reinstall a new motor wheel. Stay tuned.
So now we'll show the reinstallation of the rear motor wheel. Here we have a jack. It helps to rest the motor on the jack to raise it up because the motor itself is fairly heavy. And reinserting the axle into the dropouts is very tricky because there's a lot of pressure involved to separate these two forks out so that the slotted axle goes into the dropout. One important detail is that there's inner washers, like this one here is the inner one, and the tab, the orientation of that should face downwards so it slots right in, and it's the same on the other side. Additionally to that, there's an outer washer, which is this guy here. The orientation will be reverse of the inner. So if you look at the inner, the tab is facing down. The outer washer, the tab will face up. The reason for that is because this tab needs to catch into its hole there, a little slot, and that's a safety mechanism to prevent the motor from dropping out in case the nut was not tightened correctly. So what we'll do is we'll leave the outer washer off for now as we're just inserting the axle back in. Once we get it in, we'll put this washer on to keep it on, and then finally the nut to secure the motor. So right now we have the axle fully inserted on this side, on the disc rotor side. It makes it a little easier because we're going to be trying to pry the swing arms apart, and we don't want to put pressure on the disc rotor that may warp the brake. So we've already inserted this side, and then we'll be inserting the non-brake side over here, and we'll go ahead and do that. This part is fairly tricky, so just take your time. We're trying to secure this side first with the nut, but we'll put the outer washer on to keep from this side slipping, because what normally happens is when you try to insert one side, the other side will drop out. So we're trying to secure the one side first. So now that we flex this swing arm enough for the axle to pop in, you can see it's already mated. So now we'll use a dead blow, a soft dead blow, to tap it in. So now the axle is completely flush. We can put the outside washer in, paying attention to the orientation. The outside washer has the tab facing up, going into its recess, and now we put the nut on. So it helps to have some sort of block. Here are cardboard, corrugated cardboard blocks, but you can use like milk crates or some sturdy boxes to help it stable, or help the scooter lie stable. So now we'll just reinsert the motor wires back into the chassis, and we'll just do one lead at a time. Inserted the rubber O-ring. So sometimes you want to just massage this little O-ring back into its hole there. You can just use like a flathead and kind of partially seal it. So for now that's good. And then don't forget about this P-clamp here on the underside of the suspension span. It's a 3mm Allen bolt.
So now we're going to proceed to wiring. Remember, there's 3 wires for the main motor wire. There's green, yellow, and blue. And that would connect to these 3. And remember, yellow would go to yellow. Blue would go to green. And then green would go to blue. For safe measure, we're just gonna wrap them with tape, with electrical tape. Be sure to cover these gold leads. Make sure that none of them are exposed, because any moisture may cause short. When putting the battery back in, make sure no wires getting caught or pinched. And then just slowly drop it in. Gravity is your friend. Be careful when reconnecting these high voltage wires, because they are really high voltage wires. Now reconnect the chargers according to orientation. Now these 4 wires, black ones are negative, red ones are positive. They would go back to these 4 wires over here. Like these 4 wires.
In front of the controller.
Don't worry of like which red wire goes to which red wire. As long as red goes to red, it should be fine. Can you cut me some electrical tape, Steve?
Yep.
Then the black wires would go to black wires. It is also like a safe practice to always cover them with electrical tape, just to make sure that they wouldn't separate, or just to insulate them in general. Okay, now everything is wrapped. Before closing the deck, it's nice to just give it an inspection. If no wires are pinched, no exposed leads, no disconnected wires. And so far, I don't see anything, which is a good sign. And another tip, before putting the deck back in, it's a nice practice to just check if the motor would run. Just to see if it works properly, like the way it should be. So if you see, the motor is running nice, which means all connections are good. And now it's safe to put back the deck together and close everything up. First of all, be sure to turn it off for safe measure and proceed to closing the deck. As you see, like, this is a mess of wires. When pushing the deck down, it's okay, it's fine to just push them all down together, nice and clean. When reinstalling the deck, make sure that no wires are getting pinched on the edge of the deck. Make sure that it's all clearing. Yeah, sometimes the wires would be a little bit finicky because we had to move them around. So we just have to reorient them in a way that they wouldn't get caught when we put down the deck. I'm gonna hold the wire. I want to orient everything. And use pressure to kind of crush the wires inside. As long as they're not getting caught on the side of the decks, they should be okay.
So that concludes the video of uninstalling a motor wheel and reinstalling it. As you were able to see, it is a lengthy process, can be very tedious, but the important thing is that it can be done. You just need a lot of patience.
And one final thing before you take the scooter for a ride is just to double check all of the bolt torqueness, tightness. Torque them nice and tight, especially the rear nuts for the axle. And then be sure to reinstall the rear brake, the two 4 mil bolts that go into the swing arm. And then you're good to go. Thanks for watching.
And if you guys enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please don't forget to subscribe. We will be doing many more DIY videos to help you with all of our products, such as the Wolf Warrior, Mantis, Magnum bikes, Surons, and many more. Thank you for watching. Take care.
Get